Okay, welcome everybody. Very good to see you all here this afternoon, and welcome to those of you who are joining us on Zoom. This is a hybrid event. I'm Nick Pearce. I'm the Director of the Institute for Policy Research here at the University of Bath, a Professor of Public Policy. And I'm delighted this afternoon that we are joined by Professor Ricardo Garcia Mira. Professor Mira is the Director of the People Environment Research Group at the University of A Coruna, which he's led for a number of years, and is going to talk to us today about his work on the social, particularly social psychological dimensions of the net zero and clean energy transitions. We are very used to discussing, particularly in policy discourse, the costs and benefits of various options for transitioning to a net zero economy, thinking about how energy systems, and often about technology, and in particular, sort of technical fixes to our climate change problems. We don't as much, certainly far less, discuss the social dimensions of those transitions, what it means for communities, what it means for people, and their relationship to the environment. And Professor Garcia Mira has worked for many years on the relationship between human beings and their environmental surroundings, both in terms of energy transitions and climate change, but also in terms of natural disasters, man-made disasters, their impact on people in their environments. And so we're delighted to welcome him here today. He's going to speak to us in particular about some European work he's leading. He's an honorary professor at the Institute for Policy Research, which is, we've been very pleased to have him as an honorary professor for a number of years. And before coming back into academia at La Coruna, he was for 3 years a PSOE, a Socialist Party MP in the Spanish Parliament, in the Cortes, where he also, well, let me get this right, you were the spokesman for climate change of the Socialist Parliamentary Group in the Ecological Transition Commission. So very plugged into and part of political discussions in Spain about the net zero transition, climate change transitions. So it's great to have you here, Ricardo. Ricardo's going to give his talk, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. And if you're listening to this online, if you're watching this on Zoom, please do feed your questions in on the chat, and my colleague Julia will collate those and let me know those, and we will we'll do a Q&A. And remember that yeah, if you are doing your microphones and cameras aren't switched on, so it all has to come in through the chat for us to be able to respond to you. But that's probably enough for me in terms of the housekeeping. And Ricardo, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nick, for this reception, for this introduction. Well, and thank you very much to the Institute for Policy Research for allowing me to be with you from I think 8 years ago, no? from the 2016, I think. Well, our relations goes far back, no? To the relation that we established with the Department of Economy within the project of sustainable lifestyles and green economy for the 7th Framework Program, working with Professor Michael Finus. I think he's not here, he moved to Germany, and also with Professor Lucy Osea, who were part of the team, no? Leading the tasks from the microeconomy aspects, no? For modeling, for the economic modeling of the project. Well, let me introduce just before starting the talk, well, something about our research group. No? It's a group specialized in things related to climate change and also some aspects of risk, but also about, for example, the project Connecting was related to the way in which nature-based solutions can be implemented in cities, in towns, for coping with climate change impacts, for reducing the more negative impacts. The analysis of the energy consumption patterns or waste management and mobility aspects within different kind of organizations was the object of another project, looking at the low carbon emissions in Europe and the sustainable lifestyles that are already mentioned, or the energy transition, no? Looking at the aspects related to social innovation, psychological and social aspects as well. Well, we are a very multidisciplinary group, no? Mainly formed by architects and social scientists, no? Like psychologists, geographers, and and political scientists and educators as well. And well, we have contacts, partners. We have been working with many people from different parts of the world, and until 40 countries. We have met research groups working in collaboration with all of us. And well, our theoretical framework, our research dimensions have to do with mainly with psychological concepts related to trust, for example, looking at the trust that citizenship develop with regard to the government or with regard to the media, or to the mass media, or looking at the resilience, or looking at the participative strategies, focusing on knowledge co-production approaches, or focusing on ways of in which the citizenship can be engaged in these solutions, in these nature-based solutions, and other dimensions like credibility or community strategies, communication strategies regarding risk. Well, we're part of different projects in our analysis. So now that you know, have a brief idea of what we have been working with in the last 25 years. Well, I will introduce these are part of the projects that we have been engaged recently, and the ways of funding, mainly coming from European programs. And some of our publications are recent publications regarding always about urban sustainability, disasters, values, housing space and quality of life, cultural environmental action, and sustainability. Sustainability is a central dimension of our studies. And now we have looked at what was happening regarding the energy in Europe, and looking at the topics that the Commission have published regarding the interest of the European Commission in going deeper in the definitions related to the energy transition. We asked many questions about what the energy transition is, but even more, what a transition is really, and how this transition impacts in the citizenship, impacting people. So our strategy connects with the European strategy for knowing and for increasing the knowledge related to the social aspects engaged in the energy transition. So the objective of our research that I will present here very quickly in this half an hour that I have is the main objective is to develop a theoretical approach that allow us to put together some understanding on these cross-cutting issues, including gender as one of them, and to provide a set of policy recommendations or about what kind of policies or what kind of combination of policies can be effective when we copy with the energy transition. And looking at these social aspects, we have to consider the relations that the social aspects have with many other technological, cultural, and political aspects. This is because we put together a very transdisciplinary team looking at the economic, socioeconomic aspects, socio-technical, socio-ecological, socio-cultural, socio-political, and even socio-psychological, putting the gender dimension as a cross-cutting dimension as well. So in all our discourse, we are talking about coping strategies, about increasing knowledge, about new opportunities, new policies, new combination of these policies in order to get a comprehensive and detailed knowledge of all these social aspects, in order to produce a better understanding of the programs, a better understanding of what the transition is, as I said before. What are the coping strategies that we are finding in the different territories where the transition is happening? in order to produce these policy recommendations and produce also under a co-creation approach a common vision on the societal implication and the opportunities that we have for speaking with fundaments about what just transition can be, no? Because when we talk about just transition, we are talking about people, we are talking about justice, social justice, environmental justice. We are talking about many aspects, no? Even in a moment where everything is critical because we are still living a war from 1 year ago, we have come out from a pandemic that have impacted very seriously in the way that the states manage the energy system. So we have realized that we need to be some more autonomous than we were in the past, no? In order to copy with the impacts that general or universal things, no, that a pandemic is, or even a war, no, that impacts, as you are observing, no, impacts in the kind of energy that we import, no, from Russia, from other countries, in the relations with the European Union or with other countries beyond the European Union. So the first year of our project, we have built, no, a theoretical framework. We have built a multidimensional framework consisting of these 6 dimensions, putting in relation with another theoretical approach already known, no, in our state of the art, no? So we will approach the socio-psychological aspects from an individual coping, no, approach, looking at the individual coping, looking at the stress that individuals are coping with, and the relief. And when we talk about socio-political, we are considering the transition as a political mean. Or when we are talking about socioeconomic aspects, we are talking about the labor market structural change, no? Because the impact on the employment and the unemployment, no? When a transition produces this kind of impacts regarding the employment, well, when there is an increasing loss of employments, well, there is a social impact that we have to measure, and we have to produce knowledge about this social impact to inspire and to give support to the policies or to the combination of policies, no, that will be approved by the European institutions or by the international institutions that will have also an impact on the states. In this case, on the states members of the European Union, or in an indirect way, you know, from other countries that have some kind of relation with the energy systems managed from the European Union. For example, when we talk about the sociocultural aspects, we are talking about the need of analyze the territorial stress, which is the tension between the territorial chains, no? And the gap between the territory and the communities, no? Because the communities develop socio-psychological dimensions, like, for example, social identity, place attachment, and others that we will talk. But we need to analyze this process of deterritorialization, no? In order to learn how we can re-territorialization again, no? So transformative capacities of the territory are also part of the interest. So we are in a multi-level perspective where the European, national, regional, and local aspects are being studied, no, from this perspective. And we look at the multidisciplinary group, no, who is analyzing this from different disciplines like psychology, economics, urban studies, architecture, political science, and so on. Demography, ecology, geography, sociology. And we have also a comparative perspective, no? Because we are analyzing 13 European regions, no? Including the UK, in Wales, sorry. where somebody very well known here, like Andre Halley, is working, leading the team in the UK, in Cardiff. So, well, what we have been during the second year of the project is we have just finished the third year. We had to deal with, as I said, with a pandemic in the middle of the project, with a war that we put our hands in our head, telling, well, this is going to destroy our project. The war, the pandemic, well, the transition to another model of energy. So, well, what's happening here? We are losing the project. But, well, we put all the efforts because, well, part of the countries participating in the project, part of the 13 regions that we are analyzing are Romania, Poland, and we have in Austria also. Well, some of them are making border with Ukraine. So the massive number of refugees escaping from Ukraine, well, they were affecting and impacting in the way that we were collecting the data, making the interviews, and the pandemic also affected, because we had to stop. We couldn't interview the people, so we were introducing a differentiation factor that was impacting negatively on our data. So we had to delay until the pandemic was over, and we could collect the data. So the data collection was completed now, and the case study reports have been produced, are published they are available in the website of the project, and now we are comparing the cases. So this research had an applied framework, and it has been focused on describing the peculiarities and particularities of every case study, every region. And the cross-disciplinary co-creation approach, for saying some words about this, consists that we introduce a critical reflection on the context that the project was creating for in where the participants at various levels and with different backgrounds have come to know what is needed for driving the transition to a clean energy. So we get information and data from this knowledge integration framework, under this knowledge integration framework, through a cross-disciplinary interpretation of knowledge with different visions and points of view, constructing the scenarios that the people from the territories have built together. And we are now working on the catalog of interpretations of considering all these contributions. We finished the co-creation meetings at the European level. We had a co-creation meeting with different members of the staff of the European Commission, the General Directorate of Employment, General Directorate of Regions and Research, and well, different people that are advising to the commissioners for producing the policy and producing the reports for the Parliament. So this was very interesting, but and it was two long days online with all these people, with 15 policymakers from the European Commission and other people from other territories outside the European Union, in addition to the people from the projects and people from the countries with teams working on the European territories, including the UK. And now we have just finished, we are finishing, we have some of them pending. April and May, we are finishing the 13 regional co-creation meetings, trying to collect data, not only through interviews, but also through focus group sessions in the territories and also with a survey. Well, these are the 13 territories considered. Those writing in red are writing in red because we had a special risk here for collecting the data because the pandemic and because the war. And because we had to collect the data in the middle of this events happening in Europe, and they are not still finished. But let's say, after getting all the data, or after collecting all the data, what measures we can say about the different dimensions that we have under study? Well, first of all, the sociopolitical dimension, part of the things that we like to express have to do with the need to drive in the transition to clean energy as an European perspective, where we consider that industrialized countries should contribute to the cost of the transition with the others. So this is, well, something that is not well seen for everyone. It's very controversial, because why I have to contribute to the cost of the transition. If the cost, if for me was a well-organized transition, was a well-considered from the community and social aspects, so why I have to contribute to other less developed countries that have a very hard transition? Well, the co-creation context make easy empowering citizens and supporting social innovation in regions, increasing the acceptance of decarbonization policies. This is something that is very difficult to understand by the most of politicians, because, well, politicians like to make the option for top-down approaches, where the decisions are made in the top, and the rest have nothing to say or have nothing to understand. Well, this is completely contrary to the demands from the territories that are asking for more autonomy, at least in making suggestions for allowing to learn about what is really happening, that sometimes is different from what happened in other places. Decentralization of governance, so this is a central aspect, and the involvement of regional governments in the energy transition process is must to achieve a just energy transition. Transition narratives is another relevant aspect that show that transition to clean energy is a conflictual process in which stakeholders are reassembled in new constituencies. But more importantly, the regional heterogeneities that we have found in the territories should be taken into account while making the policies for coal and carbon intensive regions, because one size fits all approach is not working. And this is very clear. And the European Commission sometimes is producing this kind of, the same for all. And this doesn't work, as I said. Well, from the socioeconomic point of view, well, we have been looking the loss of population in 2019 relative to 2000. And we know that the implementation of decarbonization policies resulted into closure of heavy industries and job losses, as well as stresses and tensions related to the individual and the territorial identity. And the coal and carbon regions in transition facing huge population loss and drain from carbon-intensive regions was another characteristics. And finally, the big ambiguity between projected solutions in the regions and sustainable solutions. This is something that is observed permanently in every territory. The lack of consistency between sustainability and the projected solutions. Regarding the sociocultural, the key message that we would like to reinforce here have to do with the fact that while energy transition paths are under development at the European, national and regional levels, the territorial transition path of the coal and carbon territories is not clear yet. This is something also that we found. The public and private investments, paradoxically, are among the main stress vectors in the territory as they lead to conflicts, impasses, or situations of dependence. There is an urgent need to identify in which way the energy transition may trigger or foster effective territory-making strategies. The vulnerability of these territories is not a direct consequence of the energy transition. but it's a long-lasting process rooted in globalization and the relative loss of power of the states. In many of the regions under analysis, the research show that local territorial level is often peripheral to the decision-making process, which prioritize a broader regional perspective. So autonomy, decentralization of power, give voice to the local regions is part of the cultural, sociocultural analysis. And what emerged from these socioecological and technical dimensions is that the statement that the success of energy transition policy depends on the transformative capacity of the region in transition. So if this is so, no, what is needed not to build this capacity? Well, three aspects we would like to underline here. One is the need to diversify the industry, providing alternative jobs and giving training facilities, making the update of workers to another capacities like related to IT technologies or related to other specializations, no, of the industry. And secondly, it is a long-lasting process that requires empowered communities and citizens. And this, what this say? This allow me to talk in favor of the energy communities, for example, no, for administrate what the the energy, no, in a collective way, no, as an alternative to the administration by means of 2 or 3 big multinationals that are earning money, no, taking profit of the disinformation of the population. And finally, the regional and local decision-making power, which prioritize the broader regional perspective. No? So again, the need to decentralize, the need to give voice to the regions and in a cooperative way, in a co-creation way. Socio-ecological and technical dimensions, well, part of this discourse have to do with the limitation of the transformative capacity due to the long-term dependence on industrial monoculture and due to the lack of alternative jobs and training facilities, influencing in the favorable or unfavorable way, no, of making a just transition or not. The coal and carbon territories have an organization reliant and often dependent on state interventions, no? Like is the case of Spain, for example, where everything depends on the Ministry of Ecological Transition in order to increase, no, the transformative capacity. So nobody can, with the exception of private investments, no, there is no possibility of doing in other way. With few natural and human resources, some of the selected coal and carbon regions in transition are heading towards a very bleak future. So let's go quickly through the socio-psychological component. No? As one of these 6, no, components that we have been taking under study, the focus of the socio-psychological have to do with the impacts of the coal mines phase out and closure of the related industrial units on the socio-psychological well-being. The socio-psychological factors and dynamics related to the deep re-territorialization of coal and carbon regions in transition was studied, and also the transformation of this territorial and local identity of people and the regions. The research questions that we have here to give and some kind of answers have to do with what are the principal socio-psychological stress, no, faced by people, by the communities, or by the affected groups in coal and carbon intensive regions in transition. Which socio-psychological factors are more predictive of this connection between community and territory? And so what territories are suitable for reconnect, no, these factors of community and territory again? So what is the role of decarbonization threats in the intensification of territorialization processes in the regions, including aspects like immigration, like populism, or like life satisfaction, or which policies or combination of policies would be most appropriate to trigger, support, or accelerate these processes of reconnection, of reterritorialization, connecting again communities and territories. Well, what happened here? Well, this was because we introduced a survey. The method was a multi-method approach where, as I said before, considered not only desk research, but also semi-structured interviews, focus groups, survey, desk research, quantitative macroeconomic modeling. Now we are here. And we will try to produce some social representation of, in the sense that Moscovici and Duais and all their collaborators have proposed, looking at the factors, patterns, and dynamics. So if we look about the territories, about the pollution, the climate change, the natural gas, oil, well, all the things that are in competition in all these regions, we will look about the definition of the impacts through this questionnaire, referring to loss of jobs, to closure of industrial units based in coal energy, to the effect on energy security, to fall in demand to other businesses, the decreased attraction for new businesses. Well, we are looking at all of these aspects that have to do with what is happening in the territories that are submitted to this transition. And the psychological aspects have to do with behavior as well. And the final behavior is emigrating to other regions, or is to stay and accept the changes as they are, or stay and work to change the situation, or fight sometimes with protest or with mobilization, with social mobilization. For example, for immigrating, we have to look at the depopulation or the territorialization process and how this impact in the general satisfaction of life, or in the behavior that have to do with the final behavior of people of reinventing themselves, or fighting against or resist and recarbonization and recarbonize and reinvent and decarbonization. So all these aspects were explored together with place attachment dimension, psychological dimension of place attachment, and resilience as well. So the factors have to do with how the individual respond to all these things. And we are talking about individual, but also about contextual factors that have to do with social bonding, perceived fairness, economic optimism, and hardship, perceived stress, personal reinvention, place rootedness. And we have theories to analyze this in social psychology. So we put all these theories in the context of the analysis and try to explore what structural equation approaches or methodologies can we incorporate to this, looking at the different kind of place attachment, looking at place attachment, place rootedness, place identity, or social bonding, that, as you know, are different aspects to approach the place attachment, or different aspects to approach the decarbonization process through the analysis of the economic threat, the perception of the economic threat by the citizens, the individual stress, trying to focus in what way they are experiencing this stress, the perceived fairness. We are talking about justice here, and nostalgia as well. Looking at resilience, optimism, intention to stay in the coal and carbon territory, or intention to emigrate, to move out to other regions. And we will talk here regarding the decision of stay about recalcitrance to resistance, awaiting, and accepting the status quo, and personal and collective reinvention, or just submission. Well, what we have found here, looking at all these dimensions, which are susceptible to be studied from the psychological point of view, and we defined the kind of fittings, in incorporating the different theoretical frameworks that we know from psychology, and in using a Likert scale methodology, and using both nominal and ordinal data. We have got 89 items with 17 latent constructs. And the first things that we can say about this have to do with how to explain the intention to relocate. What depends the intention to relocate or staying in the place? Well, what we have to say here is that the stress and perceived economic hardship lower life satisfaction and further increase people's intention to relocate. Transformative leadership of the region, population growth, and GDP per capita have positive associations and negative effect on stress and perceived economic hardship. Employment rate associated to GDP per capita has a positive association to life satisfaction and negative to intention to relocate. And finally, the place identity and place rootedness lower the intention to relocate and stress. In this general scheme, where we can see the weights that every relation have from a regression point of view. And now we are working with trying to analyze the relative relations in order to avoid the production of artifacts, artificial artifacts, that put in relation all these things. Looking at socio-psychological dimension obligates us to look at the loss of population that produce stress and produce many other impacts. Because when we lose the jobs and the people have to come back home unemployed, this has increased in many territories. The domestic violence, the increasing of alcohol consumption, and many other aspects related to crime and related to increasing the tensions. And most of the times, these aspects are not evaluated. And this is what this project is trying to do, to give information about how this impact is produced, how this psychological stress have enough importance for being considered as arguments for rejecting or accepting giving some of the policies. So the uncertainties around the future of the core and carbon regions and the high level of place attachment create perceived psychological stress and nostalgia. And people in the regions have high sense of territorial identity that increase their resilience capacity and potential for personal reinvention. This could be used for giving support to the different strategies. And here we have the importance of incorporating co-creation approaches. The heterogeneity among the selected regions in transition regarding the intention to relocate from the region, personal reinvention and resistance and protest against the decarbonization policies are also a common part of this. So finally, the gender impact. What happened with gender? We have within the project the woman engaged for a common future, based in France, but they are an organization that are based in different countries. Even when they function independently, they are connected for the objectives and values. They are based in the Netherlands, in France, and in Germany, as far as I know. And what we obtain from the project, which is available also in our website, is that the perception of transitions currently is highly technical, and economic processes give very little relation to gender and how it is reflected in the different plans and strategies for coping with the strategies of just transition. So women, remain underrepresented, no, in the decision-making processes. So, from 2 points of view, one is the parity, you know, the nominal parity across the political sphere, that it looks very difficult to achieve. And the other one is the representation of women's interest and expertise on the energy-gender nexus, which is limited. According to what Andre Halley explored, the women appear in the general in the transition within the Wales region as a very important dimension in considering new jobs led by women, and as an unexpected thing that the researchers have presented recently. So this is something that have to be also moderated by the need of reaching equal conditions, conditions of equality for access in jobs, for defining new jobs, for defining new strategies, and so on. And finally, well, some steps that are still pending at this moment is the quantitative assessment, looking at also to the impact of personal and contextual factors. A comparative analysis is being done at this moment, the gender difference between regions as well, and the integration of survey results, and finally, the produce of the report of policy recommendations. We are working on this for the next October. We will have the final conference in Brussels on the 5th and 6th of September. And we hope to produce some reports that will reach this institute very soon. Some examples of the structural equation modeling that we are doing have to do with explanation of the intention to relocate in the people, that have to do with the influence of place attachment, place identity, place dependence, and place rootedness, but also with perceived fairness, economic hardship, economic optimism, nostalgia, and so on. Well, different dimensions that have different behaviors in the regions, but we are looking at what could be common for common politics, if it's possible, and if not, we have to advise to different policies regarding different considerations that we are finding in all this project. So, well, this is not an easy thing, coming from the fact that we are exploring 13 countries with different cultures, with different territories, different kind of impacts, different education, and with the interest playing always in function of the external interests based in multinationals that are some of them based outside the European Union. So, well, different political, technological, and socio-psychological impacts that have to be integrated in the policy and cannot be excluded. Well, thank you very much. We can open here now a series of questions and answers. And thank you very much for inviting me again. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. It's fantastic to take a seat, and we've got a bit of time for some questions. And for those of you watching on Zoom as well as with us here this afternoon, thank you very much, Ricardo. That's an incredibly interesting, complex project covering, as you said, a number of regions as well as a whole set of different theoretical questions in an interdisciplinary context. I was very interested just in I'll start the questions, if I may, in asking about the gender dimensions, which you raised at the end, which seemed to me incredibly interesting, because I think we commonly associate forms of carbon-intensive energy production, coal mining in particular, with male occupations and with the loss of male employment, and with forms of support for reactionary politics to those changes with men, that is, men who support far-right groups, populist, Vox in Spain, or the support for Donald Trump from coal miners in Virginia and so on, that there's a very sort of a very gendered sense of both the patterns of employment and patterns of industrial production in those carbon intensive areas, but also in the politics, if you like, of the sort of what's happened with deindustrialization and so on. And so I wonder then why it is we don't think of gender dimensions as much when we're thinking about the transition to new forms of clean energy and net zero, new forms of employment, new forms of community engagement, new more equal roles in our society, and new ways in which we might think of the sort of politics of those communities as they transition into clean energy. So for me, that was something which I have to say I haven't read as much about in the literature. And so I'm interested to know why you particularly approached this gender dimension in the way you did, and I'm hearing a little bit more about some of the findings and conclusions that you have from this study.
Well, yes, well, you are right. No, it's a difficult thing because the associated specializations in the coal and carbon intensive regions are mainly related to men, no? And men is in the corporations. We still look at the corporative organizations, the main corporations that managing decisions related to carbon or related to coal that are formed 100% by men. You can see one woman or two women. We don't know with what criteria, but it's not an equality criteria. Probably it's another one. And well, some of the states are giving steps. Now, this is the case of Spain, no, where Sanchez is promoting, no, women for many ministries and high position decision-making posts, where we never saw women, no, making these decisions or leading, no, the decisions and forming the teams. So this is the case of the ecological transition, no, led by Teresa Rivera, which has incorporated many women, no, in very important decision positions. No? But what I was interested in within the framework was exploring what dimensions, no, can arise from the fact of putting women in front of this situation. In the first, when I say putting women in front of this, is how the women really perceive, no, their own implication in things like this. Because many women will say, wow, this is not a thing for women. No? We want to make decisions in other aspects that have to do with, I don't know, even with the defense or but not with coal and carbon. No? This has no relation. So what we found in the focus group is many women don't perceive themselves as part of the problem. So it's very difficult when the perception is related to the culture, no, to the dominant culture, where never women made decisions about this. So the criterion has to be the participation in decision making, the parity. I believe in the parity because it's the only way to get balance, no? in the presence of women in the committees where the main decisions are made.
So we have two great questions from our online audience who enjoyed the talk very much. The first one is about the transformative leadership that you mentioned. So there's a question, what kind of political role, or what role could political actors play in the transition? What exactly does transformative leadership mean? Maybe also based on your own experience as a member of parliament. So that's a question about transformative leadership and this political role. And then there's also a question that's a bit more about, I guess, practical hands-on solution, and whether new small-scale distributed renewable energy projects could be part of a solution in these regions that you looked at.
Yes, you mentioned, Ricardo, I think midway through your talk about the need collective localized energy provision, energy systems. I think that's the sort of second part of the question there. But
collective.
well, localized and decentralized energy systems, which have some potentially more collective investment and ownership and so on. But yeah.
Yes, I think both questions are related, because the first thing that we need introducing the system is the regulations. Regulations that where the participation of and where the inclusion of a new leadership system is included. For example, when we talk about energy communities, we need to engage the population in the decisions, and this is like the community of neighbors in a neighborhood, that have to make decisions related to the park or related to the common goods. And in the energy system, there is a perception that the energy is something that it is outside. It is not part of our decisions. It's something that somebody else have to decide, and we have to apply to our system, to our transport system, to our building system of providing some kind of energy, but people don't feel engaged. So first of thing that we need is regulations that regulate both the citizen participation in decision-making in energy. It should be a way in which the people could give importance or relevance to what a community energy is, and what also a cheaper invoice should mean for the user, because they have decisions to make that are going to impact in the price of the energy at the domestic level, not only at the organizational level. So regulations are the first, and these regulations have to connect with the transformative leadership that have to be implemented in the agenda of the political parties. So the political parties have to be aware about the importance of this collective interests, incorporating into their programs, their elections programs, part of the objectives, to change the leadership, to incorporate the participation of women in the committees, in the high-level positions, in the governments, and so on. What happens with Vox and with ultra-right, with far-right parties, is that they are proposing come back to the past, trying to ridiculize all these things. When they criticize the climate change that as a lie, invented lie, like Trump has done, or like the Spanish Vox has done as well. Well, they are trying to take all the value out of the discussion. And so take the women out, take the values of climate out. And this is an invention that is trying to change the economical state of things, economical status quo, giving the influence to a part of the economical society or sector, and trying to remove the different things that are part of the structure of how the system works. So if we are able to convince political parties that the governance system has to be regulated in order to incorporate a new way of debating, a new way of engaging citizens in some important aspects for the personal well-being and social well-being, well, this is the first step, regulations. It is the same that happens with the artificial intelligence. That will be, well, it is real. It is a part of how the energy transition can be made, incorporating the artificial intelligence. But this needs to be regulated because it impacts in important dimensions of the social life, of the personal life.
Just on this point though, about the this sort of, as you describe it, very intimate connection between climate denial and anti-abortion politics, of restoring the male place in the workplace, in the politics of Vox, of Trump and others, a very sort of reactionary politics which combines these things together, as you say, the gender dimensions with climate, with economic and other policy dimensions. What is the appeal of that? Is it an appeal to the sense of a loss of status for men, a status anxiety question, or is it an appeal to recover a sense of lost patriarchy? I mean, in your study of people's sort of response to those questions, particularly the people that were nostalgic or wanted to resist decarbonisation, etc., what is the appeal of that politics which brings together these gender and other economic and social dimensions?
Well, this is what we saw when we look at the nostalgia. No, people has the trend to think that other time was better, no? Because there were work for everyone, the life was running well for everyone, the differentiation of roles, no, between men and women was working, no, everything was working, and they maintain this discourse, no? The discourse, but this is a false discourse because the dynamics of life is changing, no, very quickly, because all things change very quickly, no? Living in a competitive system, living in a neoliberal system, all the things work very quickly, no? And the impacts, even when we improve in many things, because we know more than before, we know more things, and we know how to stop with the crisis, for example, of hunger, no? We cannot understand it. We have invented, no, systems for producing food for everyone in the world. There is still people dying, no, because they have not food. So the interests, no, to maintain the status quo, no, the interest of neoliberalism to don't change the things that can move, no, in a different way, the structure of control of the power is more important. So the only way for the the far right is, well, look at the past. The past was better. We had not problems in the past. Everything was under control of the hierarchy of patriarchies, no? And everything was working well. So many people react, no, to this discourse, no, in a way that, well, you're right. The past was a happy past, no? So, but we are living another. Well, we are living another challenge, no? And there are many people living in this new challenge, no? Living in a more equal society. Many people is believing, no, that all that we have in mind is possible, that what we have discussed recently in Brussels about the universal income, no, it's part of the discourse, no, that we are exploring, trying to find a solution, no, to reduce the tensions, to reduce the unemployment, to reduce the crime, no, because it has to do with many variables.
Great. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, but are there any questions from anybody in the audience want to ask any more questions? Yeah, Matt, quick one.
Just a very quick question about, is there a tension between this, you talked about the kind of regional power and the need for kind of local engagement and ambition. But just thinking about the economic aspects of how do you replace a large number of jobs, how do you regenerate an economy that the regional buy-in that you need, the local governments just don't have the resources to be able to do that. So you do need the kind of central government and centralized kind of industrial strategy to regenerate areas. But at the same time, you need it to be the local, driven by local areas. So is there a kind of practical tension now how the policy making kind of plays out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very, very specific example of this we have now in the UK, that after Brexit, you know, we're not part of the European Union's response with the Green New Deal and Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. There's huge credits for investing in clean energy, renewables, and so on, which Europe is trying to match. country like the UK appears unable to marshal similar resources, and at the same time is also, in our context, a relatively centralised state, even with devolution to places like Wales. And so English local government, for example, hardly any money or power to address these questions in any meaningful way. So this challenge we have about the level at which the state needs to act and resources that need to be brought to bear.
This has to do with something that have been discussed in the Parliament of Spain when I was a member of the Parliament. It had to do with the incorporation of knowledge in the Parliament and with the constitution of a committee of scientists, that you have very well organized. We put an example, the UK as an example of working, and you have been very connected to that when you were.
Well, the Climate Change
working,
Act, I think, yeah.
Yes, because incorporating a committee of scientists in the Parliament with capacity for influence, the decision making to the politicians, not leave all the decision to the politicians, because they are going to respond only with tactics, with political tactics, and not responding to a set of knowledge on the subject that we want to discuss. I remember when I was a parliamentary, and Spain had not yet a law for climate change, and what I've been organizing lots of meetings with ecological groups and with different stakeholders, trying to produce, and collectively, and a draft of this law, but very quickly, the ministry told me that I couldn't do that because this responds only to the tactic of the party, And well, I was absolutely disappointed, because I was trying to incorporate the way of co-production of knowledge, with different stakeholders. Well, not probably as something that was undiscussable, but as a basement of knowledge of the reactions of the different groups of society, ecological groups, unions groups, other civil society organizations. So it's difficult, because the decision-making process is dominated in the parliaments by the political parties, and they obey to a specific tactic to maintain the power. Beyond advance in the social benefit, they many times make decisions benefiting the party, the position of the party regarding the power. So,
okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Ricardo, and can I ask everybody just to thank Ricardo in the usual way? Thank you for tuning in. If you've been on Zoom, great to have you. Great to have you here in Bath, and to listen to you lecture and to hear about your work. So it's great to see you again. The next speaker in our series, our Polycrisis series, is Professor Stefan Eich, who will join us for a lunchtime lecture on the 24th of May. He's going to be talking about his book, The Currency of Politics, The Political Theory of Money, from Aristotle to Keynes. So I hope you'll join us for that as well on the 24th of May. But thanks so much for coming. Thanks, Ricardo. Thank you.
Thank you.